Hey everyone. Before we get into this conversation, first I want to thank Shane, our guest this week, for just being extraordinarily vulnerable and courageous on sharing his story. His story also includes stuff around some abuse and some difficult parent-child dynamics. So as far as stories that may be harder to hear, there's some components of that here. I'm not a huge fan of the idea of trigger warnings. I think if you're getting triggered by stuff, that's actually a gift from your body telling you it's time to work with a therapist. So I want to encourage you to listen to this conversation, but also I want you to listen to what you need in this moment. So with that, let's get into this conversation with Shane Thrapp. ADHD Rewired, episode 465. This is the podcast for those of us with really good intentions and a slightly wandering attention. I'm Eric Tivers. I'm a licensed clinical social worker by training and a coach by design. I'm your host, and I have ADHD. ADHD Rewired is more than just a podcast. We are a community. We are wired for connection, and you are not alone. Go to ADHDrewired.com to learn how you can join us in our free and secret Facebook group. Get additional resources for every episode, including links to any resources we mention on today's show. You can support us on Patreon, sign up for our email newsletter. You can request podcast postcards to distribute to your clients and support groups. Learn all about our award-winning coaching and accountability groups. You can co-work with us in our Adult Study Hall virtual membership community. You can do all of these things by going to our website at ADHDrewired.com. We know that starting is the hardest part, so let's get started. Welcome back to another episode of ADHD Rewired. Today's guest is Shane Thrapp. Shane is a certified ADHD life, relationship, and career coach. Through his business, Creating Order from Chaos, he has helped hundreds of people find their paths through the chaos of life with ADHD and find their order and purpose. He is the operations director for the nonprofit Men's ADHD Support Group, a board member for the Inattentive ADHD Coalition, and a public speaker who works to be a voice in advocacy for adult ADHD awareness. Welcome to the show, Shane.
Thank you for having me on, Eric.
All right, so let's begin with your story, because that's where we tend to like to begin here on the show. Take us back to maybe when you were a kid, because we were talking. You had some you didn't have the smoothest journey.
No, I didn't. I was born in Northeast Texas, way out there in kind of the boondocks. And when I say boondocks, like the nearest Walmart to me was 75 miles away. The nearest grocery store to me was 30 miles away.
Wow.
And I grew up on a farm. That was kind of like the normal for me, right? Like a lot of people, like whenever I talk about this and they're like, oh, that's so weird. Well, for some people, yes. Like, but a lot of people don't realize that like 60%, 70% of America is just as rural as that. And my father was not the kindest person. Looking back at it, it seems like he probably had undiagnosed ADHD. And when you have ADHD, you are a difficult child sometimes, especially when you're an unexpected late child for a person in his 40s. And there was a lot of frustration there. And there's also the inherent frustration that comes from just not living up to what you think you're supposed to be.
And in addition to ADHD, you also do have autism as well?
Yes.
When were each of those diagnosed?
Ironically enough, my mom thought that there was something wrong with me. And so she took me to the doctor like when I was 8 or 9. And the doctor literally said, well, he's a strange one, but, I don't see anything really wrong with him. Here, take this little medication. Let's see how you react to it. And so he gave me a Ritalin pill, and I got super hyper off of it. And he goes, nope, no ADHD there.
So that was when you were a kid?
Yeah, that was when I was a kid.
Have you tried medication since then?
Mm-hmm. I was finally diagnosed when I was 34 after going to 3 different psychiatrists and taking different medications and trying to figure out what was going on with me because I knew there was something different about me. And my son had been diagnosed with ADHD when I was 30. And when I was looking at all of the different symptoms and all the different things that people go through and how it presents in adults and all of those different things, I was just like, holy crap, this is what I dealt with. This is everything. I'm literally reading off my life in some of these places. Can't keep a job, can't nail down relationships, emotional dysregulation, can't deal with authority figures, all these different issues that men go through with ADHD. And I went to my wife and I was like, I think I have ADHD. And she was like, oh, honey, you didn't know? And I'm like, no, I didn't know. How long have you known? And she was like, well, since I read your dating profile. Yeah, I'm fairly certain you have ADHD. It just completely upturned my entire world. Then it was trying to drag teeth to get diagnosed. I went to first a psychiatrist and she was like, no, I think you have depression. I was like, that doesn't make any sense to me. Right, because I'm not really a very sad person in any shape, form, or fashion. I'm normally fairly upbeat, happy, or I'm in a weird blah state. So she started me on medications, and I actually started having a lot of manic episodes. So I was like, no, okay, I'm gonna get a second opinion. And so I went to another psychiatrist, and I said, hey, I feel like I have ADHD. These are all the different symptoms I deal with. And he was like, no, adults don't have ADHD. Okay, what is your professional opinion? And he was like, oh, I think you have bipolar disorder because you said you were getting you were having manic episodes. I was like, yeah, but that was because I was on the depression medication. He's like, no, you don't. That's not how that works. And I'm like, all right, well, again, you're the professional. So they started me on bipolar medication. That actually helped me a little bit. I was like, okay, maybe there's something to this. But I was still having so many different problems with my memory. And I was having a lot of different difficulties with different issues, and my emotional dysregulation wasn't working very well. In fact, I wound up having a mental breakdown in 2016 from a major stress issue with my oldest kids. And so I finally went to a different doctor, and I went in there, and I just literally listed out. I took a piece of paper and I wrote everything that I dealt with down, and I took it in there and I said it all out to her. And she was like, "Oh, okay, well, let's talk about it." And so she started going through the questionnaire. And I was like, oh God, thank goodness somebody will at least, do this. As we're going through the questionnaire and she's noticing, I guess, things that I'm doing or mannerisms or things of that nature, she reaches over and she's pulls out another piece of paper and she starts asking me a whole lot of different questions. And she's like, do you have a difficult time looking at people in the eye? And I was like, oh yeah, I mean, I just don't, it's not something I do. And she's like, can you just really relax and just talk to me the way that you would normally talk to anybody? And I'm like, that's what I'm doing. She was, okay, how would you talk to your friends? And so I just took the mask off, right? I stopped trying to look her in the eye. I stopped trying to make sure that I was really caring about what she said. I let myself kind of drift into where I normally go. As we start going through the questions and we got finished with it, and she was like, I don't think you just have ADHD. I think you also have high functioning autism. And I'm like, what? I don't. She says, no, I'm fairly certain. And I discovered that part of me. Ironically enough, the reason that it works so well with me and why I'm able to present to a lot of people in a fairly normal way is because the way that I mask off the two of them balances most of the time.
How so?
My autism loves order. Everything needs to be in its place. It needs to be in a specific location. Don't move it. Don't touch my shit. Don't do anything that moves anything of mine. I want people to do things in a very specific way. So when it comes to following policies and procedures or creating policies and procedures, I create a very systematic system that everybody can use and put in place. So everybody is like, oh, well, he's very organized. He's very, he's very put together, right? Everything has to be done in a certain way. And I don't like it when people do not do it the way that I want them to do it, because I have built literally the most efficient manner of how everything should be done. And they're like, whenever they say here and here, you have ADHD, but you're a project manager. Yes, I'm also high functioning autistic. And apparently that side of things rules whenever it comes into things being done a certain way and how I want it done and hitting the deadlines and everybody else doing what they're supposed to be doing in the time frame that I say that they should be doing, regardless of whether or not I'm doing what I should be doing in the time frame I should be doing it in.
I was always so, when I used to work clinically with individuals with autism and ADHD, I was always so just fascinated. And I was helping my clients sort of learn these kind of planning skills. And they did this really amazing thing. They maintained it. Once they figured it out and understood what was working for them, They were really consistent with it. I was like, wow, like that's a neat trick. It just takes autism to do that, huh?
And ironically enough, I figured like these little tips and tricks and all of that stuff out when I was really first trying out my businesses, right? I had figured out that I didn't like working for people who could tell me what to do, right? I had issues with authority, and I figured that out early on in my 20s. And so I started doing management work where I was in charge of things. I could go in and this is what I wanted people to do. These are the directions I've been given by the higher ups. This is what needs to be done. And my bosses loved me because that's exactly what happened, right? Because I didn't just go in and start bossing people around and everything. I started working with each individual person, figuring out their own little system that worked for them. And then I would sit here and say, okay, have you ever heard of doing it these more efficient ways? Would this be something that you would like to do? And I had this like weird storm of servant-based leadership, very strict ideas of what is supposed to be done at what time and how to do it in the most efficient way possible. But the intensity and hyper-focus of the ADHD allowed me to know so much so quickly about a business's processes and goals and who did what which way and how they did it certain ways. And I'd done such a huge delve from basically all of the different trauma systems I have to make sure people are safe, for body language reading and understanding motivations and why people do certain things, that I was really good at that aspect of it. And so that went from being a manager to being a contracted freelance project manager for the foreseeable future of my career.
So your business, Order from Chaos, right? That's what it's called.
Creating Order from Chaos, yeah.
Creating Order from Chaos. To me, from what you're sharing, it sounds like everything in your life felt chaotic. And you were looking at, all right, how the hell do I make sense in this way with this stuff in just a logic driven way, from reading people to project management. And so what was your process to like kind of figure out like what the challenges were, how did you identify the areas of chaos?
Just because I recognized it so much. In my early 20s, I was also in an abusive relationship with my ex-wife. My entire personal life was chaos. And since I didn't have any control in that environment, I put all of my control in my professional environment. A lot of us do that. That's workaholics and different systems that we do just because we want to have some sort of control. But I had a very strong religious background. My grandmother had always taught me that a leader is a servant. And it's a very Christian mindset to have this, that we are here to serve the people, give them the tools to thrive, and then they will be able to put in place what they need. And then all you have to do from there is just encourage them. Keep pushing them, keep moving them forward, keep giving them the resources that they need when they need it. My role is to get them that person, to get them that subject matter expert, to get them those resources, to get them their inventory and get them into a place where they can do it. Especially here in the South, that's such a different mindset from the authoritarian leadership mindset of we tell you to do it and you do it the way we say to do it. It really worked. Like, okay, that worked there. How do I make that work for me? I could do it to other people, but I never really figured out how to turn it around on myself. And then when I found project management and really going into this, there's a certain type of it called Six Sigma project management. I literally just said, okay, I'm a project. What does that mean? And then I just started going through a continuous improvement of myself moving forward, continuously improving who I was, how I thought, what my processes were. And then eventually it just started kind of shifting into a point where I was healthier.
What I would love to do is kind of explore answering that question. You being a project, what does that mean? But we're going to first take a quick break. And when we come back, let's explore that question. So we will be right back. Support for ADHD Rewired comes from ADHD Rewired's award-winning coaching and accountability groups at coachingrewired.com. Registration for our spring season is happening soon with our kickoff registration event happening next week on Thursday, February 2nd at 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern. Go to coachingrewired.com and get your name on our spring interest list and get started with your pre-registration process. If you want to invest in your personal growth, develop time wisdom, and track where your time is really being spent, set healthier boundaries to make time for you, and begin reducing your daily overwhelm, all while learning beside other adults with ADHD who just get it, then this is the coaching community you've been looking for.
Before this group, I was busy but not efficient.
So I joined this group honestly because of a distracted Google search.
I joined the group for all the tricks of how to plan, and they work.
Connection and support are everything. There's nothing like having a group of people where it's safe to talk about your struggles, to share the things that are hardest, to not be judged for those things, and to actually be embraced and helped for that.
I don't feel like I'm a failure anymore. I've gotten more done in the last 10 weeks than I had done in the previous 3 or 4 years.
I realized in this group that my husband and I of 30 years had not talked about our future or our plans, and we actually sat down and did that. That's a big deal.
It all has helped me be more comfortable with who I am.
A win, I think, would be learning the value of goal making, even at my age. And I am doing so many things every single day that I wanted to do and never got done.
I learned so much about myself and discovered what's good about me in ways that I wouldn't have alone and that I didn't with a therapist, and broke through that cynicism that I don't know I would have been able to do in any other way.
This group is like an iceberg. The surface level benefits are obvious: increasing productivity, managing time blindness, learning how to plan effectively based on your values and personal goals. But that's only the tip of the iceberg. What lies underneath is so much more amazing and massive and powerful.
I think with this group, I've learned that I have a lot of things on my to-do lists. I've learned to say no a little more often, and that doing less is really what I need to be doing.
It's the best decision I've ever made.
Group has been a life-changing experience for me.
Every season, our members remind us that even with ADHD, we can do hard things. We don't have to do them alone. And our resilience really becomes next level. We share not only the tools that you can use to help with your ADHD management, but how you can bend those tools to make them work for you and your unique ADHD brain. To join our spring season of coaching and accountability groups, go to coachingrewired.com to get started on your pre-registration process. There, you will see our registration kickoff event is just around the corner. And when you join a group with either coaches Kat Hoyer or Kristen Martz, you can get $500 off registration if you join during our registration kickoff event on February 2nd at 2 p.m. Central. Deadlines to submit for all pre-registration submissions are at 12:59 p.m. the day before our registration events. So go to coachingrewired.com to get started with your pre-registration process. You add your name to the email list that says you're interested, and we will respond to the email that has a link to a 30-minute video for you to watch, some questions for you to answer, and then some questions for you to answer in a 45-second recording, a video recording that you'll send to us. That's the process. Learn more at coachingrewired.com. Growth starts at coachingrewired.com. We are back. All right, Shane. So you were looking at all of these different sort of areas of your life, and you discovered project management. And so you kind of decided to apply the things that you were learning on project management and turn your life into a project.
Yeah. Whenever I started looking at it, when I was in my upper 28 years old, my marriage had imploded at this point, and I didn't have anything but time on my hands. I was still working. I was making decent money, but I didn't have any resources. Really, I didn't have any friends to bounce ideas off of because my ex-wife had isolated me pretty severely. And so I just started taking all of the lessons I'd been learning over the last few years as a project manager and started just applying them to myself, like really trying to figure out SMART goals, right? Very specific, measurable goals that are attainable. Like, what does that mean? What does attainable mean when we're talking about our personalities? And mind you, I didn't know I had ADHD at this point. I didn't know that I was autistic. I just knew I was different. That's the one steady factor that's always been a part of my life. I was different. And I needed to figure out what to do with that. In project management, when there's a thing that's out of your control, you just plan around it. You move to the next step. You say, okay, I acknowledge that that's a thing that I can't control, and you move forward. We'll address that later when we have more resources, when we have more time, when we have more information, right? The scientific process. As I kind of went into that, I started shifting my personality to just being who I was, right? I had an idea of what I needed to be in a workplace, right? Professional workplace, but I never fit in socially. I never fit in with people because when we mask as kids, we mask from the inputs that we have from the world around us. Everything for people with ADHD and autism is an external input. So we have to figure out, okay, how do I translate these things that everybody else thinks is cool into a persona to give to people so that they don't make fun of me or hurt me? But very often those masks don't quite fit. And we get that weird uncanny valley effect where there's just something that's not quite right about that person. They laugh at the wrong point. They joke about something that's very dark humor. They say the wrong thing. They bring up something that was being talked about 10 minutes ago. It's just something that people, their lizard brain goes, there's something different about that person. They may be dangerous or anything different I should make fun of.
So what, other than being different, what was your self-concept if you were really like spending so much effort, it sounds like, in this masking?
I just thought I was a chameleon. I just thought I could fit in with whoever I wanted to. And if people didn't accept who I was presenting with them, I was really confused. Like, I'm giving you the persona that you think is cool. You like Zach from Saved by the Bell. I'm going to act very similar to Zach from Saved by the Bell.
So you learned how to kind of emulate.
Right.
I find it humorous that you say you're a kind of chameleon as you're wearing a tie-dye shirt, which is like the opposite of a chameleon.
Because I didn't have people around me really to emulate. I had books and I had TV shows, I had radio. I had that kind of personas to emulate, to mask with. But those aren't real people. Yeah. And if you put those kind of people in a real world situation, the people around you aren't comfortable. I never understood that. I never understood why, when I would portray those kind of characters, that people didn't like me. So everybody got a wall put in front of them, right? You're not worth my time to impress. I also had the added feature that in 8th grade, I became huge. I went from being a little super small 7th grader to literally being the largest person in my grade in my school at one point. And so people really didn't mess with me. I also had a temper when they did mess with me to a certain point. I had that, I had a very good example of what to do when people did the things that you didn't want them to do to you. My father.
Talk about that. Talk about because I imagine that a lot of this, probably even ability to mask, was based on survival skills that you kind of needed to have growing up with some of the stuff that you experienced.
Yeah. My father was chaos.
Yeah.
He was literal chaos. I could do exactly what he told me to do one day. I would do the exact same thing the next day, and I would probably get hit for it. He didn't know what to do with me. He wanted to go hunting with me. He wanted to take me fishing. He wanted to take me out in the woods. And I did that stuff because if I didn't, I was alone. And we always want to impress our fathers. But my dad also did amazing things, right? He saved my life at least 5 times that I can think of off the top of my head. So we have those things that we think of whenever we're thinking about our parents that they do for us, right? The sacrifices that they make for us. And a lot of that colors, like, okay, I want to do right by my dad. I want to be who he wants me to be. And so that meant I became a hunter. That meant I became somebody who cared about animals and took care of the farm. And that meant I became a good student. He dropped out in 8th grade, so he had this huge drive for me to be a good student. And so I put in all those different tools that I needed to be those things, even though I didn't care about hunting. I hated the idea of killing animals. I hated working on cars or going out logging and working at my uncle's sawmill. I had texture issues for vegetables. which when you're growing up on a farm, you can't have texture issues because we can't go to Walmart or McDonald's or to these places to get the foods that you're okay with, right? You have to eat these foods. And so I would just do the things I was supposed to do.
Sounds like it was everything that you were doing for this sort of approval and to not go against the grain, and yet it was completely like counter to who you were.
Yeah. My earliest memory of my father is actually me sitting at a table, and I couldn't have been more than 4 at the time, and I was eating cereal. I slurped it. I mean, I'm 4, right? That's kind of our thing, you know? And my dad said, stop slurping. All right. Most parents give you another warning or let you know. My father's next reaction was to wake me up from being slapped into the cabinet behind myself. And it wasn't a concern, hey boy, you know, oh my God, you know, it was a splash of water on my face and you broken, boy.
So when you were in high school, you also had dealt with some shit.
Yeah, I was super smart. I had a college level reading level at 7th grade. I was out reading what they were bringing into the middle school library. I was also reading my school textbooks because I needed to be a good student per my dad. I needed to be a good student. And if I didn't bring home A's, then I would bring to school welts. That was my choice. By the way, that was normal. Like all of my friends dealt with parents who were very similar to my dad or differently, you know, slightly different.
Do you think that shaped like how, like your even conceptualization of what was happening in your life at that point?
Yeah, I didn't think anything was different. You have to look at the TV back then as well, right? Wonder Years and all of these super fanciful, loving families. That's TV. That's not real life. In fact, I even got told that by my dad. That's TV shit. And so I would do my best in school. The problem was I was really bad at math. I was good all the way up until the point where they started adding letters into math, pre-algebra, you know, geometry. It was like somebody was speaking a foreign language to me.
So abstract.
It was just completely out there. I got division really good. But the minute we started doing anything with like fractions or decimals or things of that nature, my brain just didn't quite get it. It didn't matter that I was doing really good in science and history and English and biology and all these other classes. Because I was making C's and D's in math, everything else I did was completely invalidated. Art was completely meaningless for my father. It didn't matter that I was really good at it.
How did you cope with all of this?
I just retreated into books.
Yeah.
Other worlds were more important than my world.
Was there any numbing?
A lot of it.
Yeah.
Actually, I think that's why I was so good at reading, was because at least in those worlds, I wasn't getting hit. I wasn't being made fun of. And then I stopped caring. I stopped caring. I would read those textbooks. I would go to class. I would sleep because it didn't mean anything. Nothing meant anything. As long as I brought home good grades, anything outside of that, I didn't need to try. There's no point in it.
You think you were kind of emotionally cutting yourself off?
Mm-hmm. And then, of course, teenage years, I got into weed, smoking weed all the time. And I had access to alcohol. I had lots of access to alcohol, but I wouldn't drink beer. I would only drink whiskey and stuff like that. And I figured that if I smoked weed only with my friends, that I wouldn't be an addict. And then I put everything in football at that point. Like, fine, I'm going to go to college. That's my focus. That's my hyper focus is football. And I became really good. And then my junior year, I blew my back out. 2 lower discs in my lower back, and I completely ruined my entire idea of football. And of course, my doctors, to help me with the pain that I was going through, prescribed me OxyContin.
How did that turn out?
Hey, 30% chance of higher likelihood of addiction, people, for ADHD kids. And I said, you know what? You're damn right I'm in pain. Every time for the next 3 years. Right, I knew what to say. I knew how to say it. I knew which doctors I could go to make sure I kept my prescription going up if the other ones wouldn't do it. What did it matter, you know? Because at this point, after I graduated, I lost all the structure from school. My mom had finally decided to leave my dad once I was old enough to take care of myself. My dad and I had finally had the last falling out that we were going to have. He wound up in jail so that I could steal his car and get away from him. And I became essentially homeless my last year of school.
In high school?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
You know, I guilt tripped my mom into paying for rent, but I couldn't afford electricity bills or anything like that because I had to, A, go to school, and B, a fairly decent drug habit at this point. You know, what do you do at that point? And then school ends and I don't have any chance to go to the military, which was one option I thought I had. But the minute they found out about back injury, they were like, nope, sorry. Couldn't go to school because I didn't know the process and I didn't learn what the next steps were to take. So I was kind of stuck in that weird limbo that we get into when everything's too overwhelming. Mm-hmm. There's too many choices. There's too many things you have to do to get into it. You have to apply for the FAFSA. You have to make sure you have your taxes. You have to find a job that you can work and still go to school. You have to do all those things and go to school. And I was so done with that shit. High school, what the fuck? I was done with that shit. And then I got into a relationship, and all of my hyper-focus went into this relationship. I ignored every red flag there was to have. My friends telling me, hey, she talks mad shit about you. You know, she rags the snot out of you around everybody else, but I was like, nah. My hyper-focus was on this woman. And she did get me off drugs, right? She gave me a choice, and that's how strong my hyper-focus was. She said, hey, you have a choice, me or the drugs. And I chose her, and I stopped right there at that point.
Wow.
I'm in church again at this point. I'm in leadership in the church at this point. They're like, you can't be living with a girl and be a leader in a church. And I was like, okay, well, and I proposed to her. Her friends were like, dude, you can't get married to her. 2 months later, she's pregnant. My church is like, you have to get married to her. You cannot let your child be born out of wedlock. If they die, they will immediately go to hell. Wow. I was super scared of this stuff. When you have 11, 12 old white dudes screaming at you over an hour, dousing you with holy oil and holy water to get the demon of whatever the hell is going on with this child out of you, you have a very healthy appreciation what hell looks like. So I got married to her, and the abuse started.
In hindsight, do you realize that probably the first 17 or 18 years of your life is actually what hell looks like?
Right? Yeah.
So I wonder how in hindsight, as you learn about what actually healthy relationships look like and what healthy families look like, there was a greater sort of grieving process for you as you're realizing, wow, that shit was fucked up.
It was actually when I discovered I had ADHD. Mm-hmm. Moving us back to when I did the project management on myself, right? When I said, okay, I'm going to be who I am, right? I'm going to be okay with that. Project management, 28, 29 years old. I'm going to be who I am. I am not going to let this stuff hold me back anymore. I made a huge change in who I was going to be, and I accepted who I was.
So let's take a quick break, and when we come back, let's figure out what you did from there. Because man, you had the building of a story that could have gone one of many different ways, and it's good to hear that it seems like you've turned your mess into your message. So we will be right back. Support for ADHD Rewired comes from Adult Study Hall at adultstudyhall.com. If working with others helps get you launched or helps you stay motivated to work through your toughest to-dos, then join our ADHD-friendly body-doubling co-working community at adultstudyhall.com. It's only $19.99 a month, and it is free to try for the first week. Your membership includes access to our Adult Study Hall Plus or ASH Plus sessions, where you can tackle anything from job searches, resume writing, cleaning and decluttering, creative work, and more. Your membership also gives you access to our 24/7 drop-in room. We call it ASH 24/7 because, well, I think you get it. It's open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for around-the-clock body doubling, no matter where you are in the world. Learn more about our current and upcoming Ash Plus sessions, our 24/7 drop-in room, and our amazing body doubling community at adultstudyhall.com. It is free to try for the first week and only $19.99 a month after that. And if you do sign up for that free week, don't forget to try it because it works better when you do that. Kind of like your umbrella when it's raining but you left it in the car. It doesn't really help you when you leave it in the car. That's adultstudyhall.com. Support for ADHD Rewired comes from our patrons at ADHDrewired.com/Patreon. Does this podcast help you understand your ADHD a little better? Would you like to get more from ADHD Rewired? While you can keep listening to this podcast for free, this podcast is not free to create or produce. I just had to spend a little more than $700 on a new mixer this month because there was something wrong with my other one and it was not giving me the high quality audio that you've come to rely on. Editing and hosting also adds up to $700 to $800 a month, and we're also investing in creating some new podcasts as well. If the work we are doing has had a positive impact on your ADHD journey, if you're able to, if you're in a financial position where you can give $5, $10, $25 a month or more, please consider becoming a patron by going to ADHDrewired.com/Patreon. Perks start at just $5 a month, and support can start at any amount that makes sense to you. We've recently had a bit of a dip in the number of people giving each month, which I get happens time to time for various reasons. So if you're in a place where you could support our work, if you keep meaning to become a patron, come on over to ADHDrewired.com/Patreon and just click the Patreon tab at the top of the page. You can even save about 8% of whichever monthly contribution you choose to sign up with when you switch to an annual plan, which comes out to about getting 1 month free. A huge thank you to our Patreon community for supporting us every month, and thank you to all of our listeners for taking the time to tune in every week. Consider becoming a patron over at ADHDrewired.com/Patreon. That's ADHDrewired.com/Patreon. And thanks. All right, we are back with Shane Thrapp. All right, so Shane, you've had a hell of a growing up. Like which led you into an abusive marriage, which you then ended. You learned that you had ADHD. Wait, you're how old again when you learned you had ADHD?
31-ish.
And you're how old are now?
41.
Okay, so you learned you had ADHD, and then you said that changed how you were thinking about your past. How so?
Yeah, because looking back, when I started learning about ADHD, I had learned because my son was diagnosed with ADHD. And then I started learning about ADHD. And I started putting my project management skills to use. And ADHD became a passion, a hyper-focus. I'm going to be there for my oldest son. I'm going to be there for him. I'm going to be the one he needs because my ex-wife doesn't care about mental health. And the more I started learning about it, the more I started seeing everything that I went through as a child, as a teenager, as a young adult, as an adult, I was enraged for so long. Because not that it really would have changed a whole lot about my dad, I don't think. I think if a doctor had told my dad that I had ADHD, he would have had that same kind of mindset that men have about mental health issues to start with, especially here in the South, that you just get over it, right? You just be a man, push through, be strong.
Stuff those emotions down. And
yeah. But I think my mom would have been able to do something different. I feel like my mom would have had my back more in school. I feel like my school, I actually had good teachers, by the way, for the most part. I feel like my school would have been like, oh, okay, that's why this is happening. But at the same time, I don't know. Since we don't know, we can't really dwell on it for a whole long time. And again, what you can't
you
change,
can, but it doesn't really help anything.
Right. So project management kicks in. What you can't change, what you can't control, shift around it. We'll move on. We'll deal with it when we have the ability to deal with it. The reason I had the breakdown in 2016 was because I realized that my ADHD as a young man, a young father, had caused me to abused my children. I had emotional dysregulation moments. I was super stressed because their mother was super, super abusive. I was working 100 hours a week most times because I had to be a provider of the family, but I couldn't keep a steady job. And so there are these massive gaps as well. And even though I had started finding my stride in my mid-20s, it was a little too late. I had already earned the reputation from my wife of being unreliable and all of those things. And I had just really been gaslit so many things about if I wasn't coming home, helping her with chores, playing with the kids, I was being a horrible father and a parent and a husband. It didn't matter if I was working 16 hours that day. I still needed to come home, do chores, and play with the kids. It didn't matter that I only had 6 hours that I had to get sleep before I had to get back up and do it all over again. Working 7 days a week, working 350 days a year. And I did the wrong thing. I figured that as long as I wasn't being my father, right? As long as I wasn't like beating the living snot out of them, as long as I wasn't laying hands on them, I was fine. But there's plenty of points where my kids did something and that instinct hits. One time my son woke me up and he thought it was funny. He wanted to jump on me, but he jumped on me. I had 1 hour of sleep. I had been working 4 days straight. And when he hit me, I swept him off of me and I made a hole in the wall with his body. So when they were 16 and 14, my oldest son and daughter, I sat down with them and I explained to them about ADHD. My ADHD. I tried to explain to them about emotional dysregulation and stress and frustration and how that affects us, how trauma makes us have trigger memories where we do things in a moment that we didn't mean to. I begged their forgiveness. I told them I would be a good father from now on. Sometimes the best intentions, though, especially when you're dealing with teenagers, isn't good enough. The damage has already been done. They've had 8-10 years of their mother essentially proving to them of how horrible of a person I was. And now they have me in front of them owning my mistakes.
Which takes a lot of courage.
Yeah, I can hindsight look back and go, yeah, that is very true. It did not go well.
Yeah.
I went up having a mental breakdown because of it. Being rejected by your kids is a difficult thing, people.
Mm-hmm.
Even if you do deserve it, and I did, right? I have to prove that I'm going to be this new person, right? You can't just say it. Too many abusers saying they're going to be the good person. They go to church, I'm going to be a different person, right? And them hearing me say I'm going to be a better father after I've said this so many times over the past, 16 years of their life. I'm going to be better. I'm going to be better. Still making mistakes. I haven't talked to them since, really. Text my daughter every now and then. She texts back every now and then.
How old are they now?
19 and 17.
So what are you doing now to try to maintain that relationship?
Write to them, send them text messages, email them, message them on Facebook if I can. They haven't blocked me, right? I don't know if the phones I'm texting are the same phones that I should be texting them to. I don't know if they read the emails. I don't know where they live.
So did they move away, or did you what happened? So because they were, you said 14 and 16 at that time.
Their mom had moved to Texas, where we were originally from, and I had moved to North Carolina for work.
Okay.
And so
this conversation to them was before that, right before that move happened. Then it sounds like.
No, I'd been living here for a while,
okay.
But their mom wouldn't honor the divorce decree, so I couldn't get them when I was supposed to. But it was my fault, not theirs. Or not hers, because that's who they got the story from. Didn't matter if I was willing to pay for plane tickets or anything like that. It didn't matter if I was willing to drive to pick them up. None of that mattered. But I'd gotten to see them, and I'd gotten to spend some time with them, and then we had the conversation, and then from that point on, it just went south from there. And yeah.
What are you hoping for your future with your kids?
That one day they will hear my story and go, "Oh, I don't know." They have a little brother and sister that I'd love them to meet and spend time with them. But that's the thing. We have to learn from the mistakes that we make. All of the things that I learned of being a parent and how to be a good parent, right? Because whenever I turned my life into a normalcy, right, I wanted to find the normal. My wife met me at that point. She met me at the point where I was exactly who I said I was in a dating profile. I wasn't this thing that I made up for the specific girl that I wanted to date, right? I was exactly who I was on my profile, and she liked that guy, and she liked me, and we've been together ever since. September 9th, 2012. We haven't been separated for more than a few days since then. She has the completely opposite story of me. Completely normal childhood. In fact, her childhood is exactly like what you see on the TV shows. Like two parents who love each other amazingly. The father is an IT guy at a productions facility. Her mom's a teacher and then a landscaper. They have 2.5 kids because it's like her and her brother and a dog, all the time a dog. They do the traveling thing. They go hiking all the time. They go biking. They go to all these different destinations. And, her and her brother barely ever fought. Like, it was just a completely vanilla thing. And I couldn't understand it to save my life. And I would ask her questions. I was like, what was that like? Did your dad and mom ever spank you? And like, no, not really. What? Are you serious? Were you just badasses all the time? No, we just did what we were told. What? Shut up. What does that look like? And she's like, that's normal, dude. And I'm like, no, it's not. And like, the more she hears my story, the more she's like, oh. And so I go to the therapist and I'm talking to her about it too. And I'm telling her about my childhood and I'm watching the growing look of horror on their face as I'm sitting here talking about being hit with extension cords and woke up at 4 a.m. to be dragged out into the woods so that we can chop down 100 acres of trees for that month. And I'm like, yeah, I had a fairly normal childhood. And both my wife and the therapist reaction are like, that's not normal. Wow. That's not a normal childhood.
I'm just, when you said that particularly, I'm just imagining, my son who has ADHD and autism and he's highly gifted. So, kind of similar profile, I think, to you. To think about him being pulled out of bed to cut down tree, like, you've been through some horrific shit. And I know that sometimes it takes a lifetime of working through this to make sense of the stuff and to make peace with it and to it's I don't think any of us would wish any of those experiences on anyone, but I think that when we can find the lesson in the chaos, right, because which is a choice. We have a choice on if we want to choose to learn from this, or are we gonna? Because it would be completely understandable to play the role of the victim, right? Because you've had some shit, like for real shit, right?
Yeah.
So, what was it that sparked your interest in now working with and leading an ADHD support group that you have on Facebook?
My kids being born really was the spark. I have twin toddlers. They're 3 now.
Just so the listeners know, Shane had a big smile as soon as he said that.
They are my entire world. Breakdown in 2016, I didn't let myself heal. I kept trying to work. 2018, my body said, no, we're done. And so I, essentially bedridden for a few months. Wow. Couldn't get out of bed, couldn't do anything. Lost my major job that I was working for as a project manager for Cisco. There's only so much accommodations that they can do. And I still needed to be a provider, right? We're drummed into our heads as kids. And then for Christmas 2018, my wife hands me a package and she goes, hey, here, open it up. We're going to it's before we leave to go to her completely vanilla Christmas family inside our 3 pregnancy tests. And I'm like, oh, what? And she was, yeah. It was a little bit of a surprise. It was still like, okay. And my brain started to go down that anxiety path. And this is why my wife and I are so good together. My wife saw it and she goes, no, you're going to be the best stay-at-home dad ever. I didn't let myself go down that path. I said, you know what? You're damn right I am. Went to the doctor a month later to find out, what's going on, And we go in there and the doctor does all the different sonogram stuff. And as we go into it, we had just joked, what if there's 2 of them? And the doctor is like, oh, that's cute. And my wife's like looking at it and she's looking at it and she goes, and the doctor, oh, there's 2 of them. And we were like, oh, there's 2 of them. And my wife starts cursing a blue streak, right? And we're both like, even to this day, every now and then, especially when they do something like really heinous, like, oh, there's 2 of them. And I was like, oh, and my wife did it again. Don't go there. You're going to be great. I listened to her. And then in May, y'all do the math there, guys. In May, my wife has contractions and we have to go to the hospital at 23 weeks. We have a very, very tough conversation with doctors and actually really amazing nurse who breaks everything down to us about what it means to have babies at 23 weeks, 24 weeks, 25 weeks in the state of North Carolina, and how we have a choice until 25 weeks when we don't, and what that looks like. Possibility of life, what that looks like. My wife is a special needs teacher. I don't know if I've said that. So she knows what this looks like in 16 years.
Yeah.
Right? The quality of life, what it looks like a child going through being born that early and the difficulty that they have through life. My wife has a visceral understanding of what that means. Her body, her choice. She gets to make this decision. I'm here to support her, but we have to make a decision. After 25 weeks, we don't have a choice. The doctors have to do everything they can to make sure those babies live. Doesn't matter what it looks like in 16 years. They are legally required and to make sure that they live. But we have amazing doctors. They were able to get her to stabilize, bed rest, which is fine. She's a teacher. She's already been chilling and relaxing anyways because the school's over. Then at 27 weeks, she's like, I'm not really feeling too great. I'm like, okay, well, you know what we're supposed to do? We've made the plans for this. I'm a very organized person. We grab the bag. She goes to the hospital, and I get a call. Hey, everything seems to be okay. Go to the hospital, getting ready to check her out. The doctor comes in, we're going to do a final check. And the nurse practitioner, trainer person, does it. Oh, the doctor's like, oh, let me see. Oh, all right. So we're going to go ahead and get this room set aside for your wife. We're going to go ahead and have some twins. And 35 minutes later, my kids are born.
Oh, my God.
Yeah. It was an army of nurses and doctors, an army of them. Right? There's probably 25 nurses and nurses in the and doctors in the operating room doing all the different things, and they're asking questions. Or I've literally got a nurse sitting next to me, and apparently her entire job is just to make me chuckle and laugh, and make my wife chuckle and laugh. Because all she's doing is sitting here just literally almost a stand-up routine joking with us about stuff, right?
I can think of so many ADHDers that would be such a good job for them.
Right? Completely chill. Hey, let's talk about this really funny thing that happened the other day. And then she hands me a child and she goes, here's your daughter. Oh, holy shit. And y'all can't see me, but she's literally, she's 2 pounds, 8 ounces, and she's 14 inches long.
Oh my gosh.
And I'm like, holy shit, she looks like a little alien. That's normal. Oh, here, let's go ahead and take care of her and everything. And then they get her and they put them in the units, and my babies are perfectly healthy. A few little issues, right? And they wind up in the ICU for 78 and 85 days.
Wow.
But they were great because of that, we had access to all of these resources all of a sudden. Preemies in the state of North Carolina get access to a huge amount of resources. They get immediately occupational therapists and physical therapists and speech therapists and all these different things that come into play as the children are developing and getting older. Through this entire time, we start getting taught by the therapist. The therapists don't really have anything to do with the kids at this point. They're just teaching us. These are what you should be expecting. This is what you should be expecting. This is what you should be expecting. Here's some developmental milestones we're going to be looking for. Here's how you parent your kids. These are the things that you can do for your kids. Mind you, I'd started learning about ADHD 10 years before, right? I'd started just doing this hyper-focus, and I never stopped, by the way. But now I'm hearing these therapists talking about how to parent your kids so that they grow up in an environment of healthy, of being able to develop in a certain way and to develop without any expectations of how they're supposed to develop. Only, hey, these are what we're looking for at these certain points. This is what we want to see at these certain points. What kind of expectations? You shouldn't have any expectations. These are the signs we're going to be looking for. These are the neurodevelopmental signs we're looking for. Here's the physical signs we're looking for. And the more I'm hearing this, the more why couldn't I have had that? Right? And that was the click. I couldn't have that because my dad didn't know. My mom didn't know. They don't know. They don't know. That's all that ran through my head. How do I teach people? And that was it. I'm going to start teaching people how to figure this stuff out. I didn't know what that looked like at that point, but I'm a project manager. What's this project look like? I don't have the resources to go back to school, and I don't want to be a therapist. No offense to therapists out there. I want to help people do things in a systematic way that pushes them forward continuously. And I want to be able to do that for them. What does that look like? And then I actually wound up meeting a coach and talking to her. And she walked me through it. And the more we walked through it, she says, why don't you just become a coach? And I'm like, I don't know. What does that look like? She goes, it looks like exactly like what you're wanting to do, right? Give people the tools and the resources and the things that they need. You've been doing it for 15 years now. You just have to figure out how to do it as a coach and not as a boss. And that was a journey. I got certified in different coaching programs. I went and worked with my wife to go through a testing system through her school for ADHD, specific autism, different special needs programs, right? So I needed to understand what that looked like, right? I worked with the different therapists, and they gave me the resources to be able to get the training that I needed for teaching people how to parent. Because here's the irony of all this. All of the different things that therapists teach people in early developmental stages for children who are special needs are the same thing people as adults with ADHD and autism need to learn as adults to be able to process through the things that they need to do. It just needs to be advanced to the point, right? We have to take people all the way back to their childhood and go, okay, everything you didn't learn then, we have to teach you now. Taking all those different testings and learnings, it's fired up this passion for me. And that was my coaching. That's where coaching came from. I wanted to be a coach. And so now I help people doing that as a coach. But it still wasn't enough. And then I found the Men's ADHD Support Group on Facebook, started by Mark Almodovar. As I'm in there, he had a strict rule: no spamming, no coaching, nothing like that. It's a peer-to-peer support group, right? And I loved that because that's one of the things I hated about a lot of other groups. And no offense, if that's something you do and if that's the group that you run, there's nothing wrong with that. But Mark didn't want that. He wanted a peer-to-peer support group. He wanted the admins and the mods to be there to create the culture of support, of men supporting each other, right? Not making fun of each other, not talking about toxic positivity, none of this pull yourself up by the bootstraps, none of that toxic masculinity thing, none of that. Men showing other men true support. And the more I saw it, the more I said, I have to be a part of this. Mm-hmm. And I messaged him. I said, hey, dude, I want to be a part of this. And he sat down with me and he goes, you can't spam the group. I'm like, dude, it's not a problem. And the more we talked, the more things clicked. Then we started doing it, right? And the more I wanted to see more of it, the more I wanted to see this become a thing, the more he wanted to see it more of a thing. The admins, the mods, all of us are like, this is pretty cool. All right, let's keep going. And we started having, we do the biweekly sessions and we do the chats on Discord and all those different things. But the core of it is peer-to-peer support.
Yeah.
People at different parts of their journey, at different levels of society, at different levels of understanding, of education, of addiction, of sexual, issues, of trauma, of other disabilities, all these different people coming together to work in an environment that teaches each other empathy and understanding and making sure that we're keeping the humor there, right?
Because if you weren't laughing, we'd be crying, right?
Right. But not at the expense of somebody who's struggling.
Sure.
Right? We want to find the humor in the stories that people tell, but not at the expense of the person telling the story. So coaching businesses was going great, and I'm having a lot of fun doing that. And because we talk about our businesses, right? We talk about what we do, but we don't talk about it in a way of drumming up business. But a few months ago, I went to Mark and I'm like, why don't we make this a thing? He's like, dude, I'm not trying to make money off this. Like, we don't have to make money off of it. Let's make it a nonprofit. What does that look like? I don't know. And in true ADHD fashion, we just jumped into it. I turned it into a project for us. Mark and John Hazelwood, they're both, social media people.
I met John at the CHAD conference. He's actually, I literally have his card sitting on my desk right here.
Hey, I made that card. You know that card? I did that. We all just kind of just said, okay, let's do this. And we're learning along the ways, and we're pulling in different people, and we're like, all right, what does this look like? What am I supposed to do here? All right, this looks good. Okay, everything goes into my huge document that I've got built up, and it became real because we actually created the business. And John and Mark were at the conference, and they were like, hey, yeah, we're going to really do this. And then we started talking to people.
Well, Shane, let me thank you for sharing your story so vulnerably and courageously, and for sharing just your, the stories of both trauma and your path to healing. I know, like, for many of us, we'll probably forever be on that path of healing. Mm-hmm. But I want to thank you and just also congratulate you for what you're doing. The website is creatingorderfromchaos.com. Is there any other place that people can learn more about you?
Men's ADHD Support Group.org is now in play. So you can find me there as well.
All right. And we will post the links to that in this episode's show notes. Shane Thrapp, thank you so much for sharing your story and for doing what you're doing for the ADHD community. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much for having me on, man. Appreciate it.
This is Eric Tivers. Thank you for listening, and congratulations for making it to the end. ADHD reWired is more than just a podcast. We are a community focused on learning, growing, and connection. The website is ADHDrewired.com. You can find time-stamped summaries and additional resources for each episode. Apply to join our free and secret Facebook community. Learn more about our award-winning intensive online video-based coaching and accountability groups. Join the Adult Study Hall virtual co-working membership community. Find all the other podcasts on the ADHD reWired podcast network. Sign up for my email newsletter to get exclusive content that you won't hear anywhere else. And use the search tool to find episodes on specific topics. You can do all of this at ADHDrewired.com. While you're there, click on the Patreon button. If you are a regular listener, consider making a monthly contribution by becoming a patron. If you are able to financially support my work, it would mean a lot. This show is free to you, the listener, but it's not free to produce. Plus, patrons get cool perks like ad-free episodes and access to recordings of coaching calls, and $25 a month patrons can join me once a month for a group coaching call. You can follow me on Twitter at Eric Tivers. You can like our Facebook page at facebook.com/ADHD reWired. If you're a coach, therapist, or related professional, connect with me on LinkedIn at linkedin.com/Eric Tivers. Subscribe to ADHD reWired on YouTube to see selective interviews and other videos I've made. Podcasts change lives. You can make a difference in someone's life by spreading the word about this podcast. Mention it in your online communities on Facebook, Twitter, Reddit, or wherever you hang out online. And be sure to share it with your friends, family, your therapists, your coaches, doctors, siblings, parents. And if you, your coach, therapist, doctor, or ADHD support group leader would like a pack of podcast postcards to hand out, you can request those at the website, ADHDrewired.com. If you're a member of CHAD, ADA, or any other ADHD support group, please be sure to tell them about this show and all the shows on the ADHD Rewired Podcast Network. You can even show them how to download it on their phone. And if you really loved this particular episode, please hit share on your podcast player. I'm only one person, and I do count on you to help spread this message. One of the biggest things that you can do to support this podcast and help other people discover it is to leave an honest rating and review on Apple Podcasts or any other app that supports reviews. And don't forget to hit subscribe so new episodes are automatically pushed to your favorite podcast app. Looking for more ways to listen and learn? Get a free audiobook and a 30-day free trial at Audible by going to audibletrial.com/ADHD Rewired. Here is my list of must-listen-to audiobooks updated July 2021. Nonviolent Communication by Marshall Rosenberg. Attached by Amir Levin and Rachel Heller. Atomic Habits by James Clear. The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team by Patrick Lencioni. Crucial Conversations by Carrie Patterson. The Coaching Habit by Michael Stainer. The Body Keeps Score by Bessel van der Kolk. Rest by Alex Sujong Kim Pang. The 5-Second Rule by Mel Robbins. Make It Stick. The Science of Successful Learning by Peter Brown. The Productivity Project by Chris Bailey. Meditation for Fidgety Skeptics by Dan Harris. Change Your Questions, Change Your Life by Marilee G. Adams. I always recommend to my coaches and admin that they read that book. The One Thing by Gary Keller, a required reading for all of our coaching group members. Procrastinate on Purpose by Rory Baden. The 4 Tendencies by Gretchen Rubin. The Art of Asking by Amanda Palmer. And if you're looking for something a little bit more magical, I have fallen in love with the Harry Potter series, and the narrator, Jim Dale, is amazing. And of course, if you haven't yet boarded the Brene Brown bus, all of her stuff is great, starting with Gifts of Imperfection, Daring Greatly, Rising Strong, and The Power of Vulnerability. And if you're an entrepreneur or leader, be sure to check out her book, Dare to Lead. Do you have something that you would like to share? Click on the podcast tab at ADHD Rewired. Click the button to be a guest at the top of the page and schedule a 15-minute interview. This is Eric Tivers, reminding you to keep learning, growing, and connecting. Self-care is not selfish. No matter what you get done or don't get done, you are still enough. And no matter how hard it feels, we can do hard things. And we don't need to do them in the hardest way possible. Thanks for listening. I'll catch you next week.